He was called the prophet and shepherd. He reportedly possessed healing powers and through his preaching attracted tens of thousands of followers. His name, Alexander Bedward, the man who made his mark in the history of Jamaica from the late 1890s to the 1920s as a preacher, healer, advocate for social justice, and reincarnation of biblical holy men. But in the view of his opposers, he was just a mad man. In this video, I examined the death registration form of Alexander Bedward to reveal the official cause of his death and look briefly at his life. I am Nigel D. Salmon. Welcome to Jamaican Chapter. This is the death registration form for Alexander Bedward. I will begin looking at the form by starting on the left of the form. And then I will go towards his cause of death. So here on the left of the form it says date and place of death, 8th November 1930, and in terms of place, Lunatic Asylum, Kingston. So Alexander Bedward died on Saturday, November 8, 1930. And in terms of place, it's Lunatic Asylum in Kingston. Now, many of you may not know where this is because the name sounds unfamiliar. Well, this place is what is called today Bellevue Hospital. Between 1861 and 1938, it was called Lunatic Asylum. Then the name changed to Jamaica Mental Hospital in 1938, and then in 1946 it was renamed Bellevue Hospital. Alright, let's continue. In the next box we see full name, and they wrote Alexander Bedward. Beside that, I'm just gonna skip that. That points to his gender. We all know he was male. In the other box we see condition. Now, condition means marital status, and they wrote married. So yes, Bedward was married to a woman called Elizabeth. Beside that, we see age, last birthday, and they put 80. We'll continue on. Beside that, we see rank, profession, or occupation. And they wrote preacher. That he was a preacher at the up to the time that he was admitted at the lunatic asylum. But what was he prior to that? Well, Alexander Bedward was born in 1850. Some say 1848, others say 1870, but we're gonna go with the death registration form. He was 80 years old in 1930 when he died. So he was born in 1850. His place of birth is that place which is now called Matilda's Corner. But back in history, it was just part of a plantation called Hope Plantation or Hope Estate. So when Alexander Bedward was born, there was no Matilda's Corner. That whole area was part of a plantation called Hope Estate. Anyway, Bedward, then a young adult, got employed on Mr. Louis Verley's sugarcane property at Mona, St. Andrew, just a walking distance away. He worked on the sugar estate until 1883. That year, 1883, he, along with some other Jamaican men, traveled to Panama to work on the Panama Canal. He worked in Panama as a construction worker for 2 years, returning to Jamaica in 1885. He then resumed work at the sugar cane estate owned by Mr. Verley. By this time though, Bedward was having dreams he interpreted as visions from God calling him. He got baptized into the Jamaica Native Baptist Free Church in Augustown, St. Andrew. In October of 1891, he left his job at the sugarcane estate so he could give more of his time to his religious ministry. The same year, he became the new bishop of Native Baptist Free Church, and he became the bishop after the aging founder of the church, a man called Harrison E. Woods, retired and appointed Bedward as the man to succeed him in running the church. Alexander Bedward, he found God, and he also found his wife Elizabeth. Believing he had found his true purpose, Bedward teached and preached to all ears that listened. His words were accepted easily by the poor, because not only was he preaching God, repentance, and heaven, he was boldly condemning inequalities between the black and the white races and condemning some government activities. He soon was attracting a large amount of followers, especially when word spread that he is a healer. He performed much of his preaching and healing beside Hope River, a place he said God had led him. He sold water from Hope River as healing water. As his followers grew in the thousands, his fame grew. Bedwardism began spreading rapidly, attracting thousands. With all this happening, opposition against Bedward also grew from some white privileged citizens, the Catholic Church, and government officials. You see, when any man began having influence over thousands of citizens, the government will start looking at that man and his activities. And that's what happened with Alexander Bedward. In his sermons and interviews, he was saying a lot of things which were not favorable to the privileged class and the colonial government. But some of his claims were considered complete madness, and he was also ridiculed. For example, Bedward at times claimed to be the reincarnation of Moses, and at other times Jesus or John the Baptist. He also claimed to be one of the two witnesses from the book of Revelation. So you can clearly see why many individuals thought he was going crazy. And those individuals would be, of course, his opposers and non-believers. Probably the weirdest act by Alexander Bedward happened on Friday, December 31, 1920. Bedward had publicly announced that on that day he will ascend to heaven like Elijah from the Bible. This came as no surprise from many of his followers. They knew the story of Elijah in the Bible, the books of Kings, and how God had taken Elijah up to heaven. No doubt, they had no doubt that God can do it again. Before December 31 arrived, Bedward told his followers to sell all their earthly possessions and give him the money. Believing the prophet, some of them did just that. Soon Friday, December 31, 1920 arrived. From early in the morning, in fact, from the evening before, about 3,000 to 6,000 people turned up at the place Bedward said he will ascend from to heaven. Those who believed in the words of Bedward was filled with godly emotions. Some prayed while others were just merely curious. Bedward had announced that he would ascend to heaven at 10 a.m. that Friday. Nearing that hour, Bedward came out to ascend from the chariot. The chariot, of course, was just a chair. Then 10 a.m. came with Bedford standing on the chair. The people looked up into the sky expecting to see it opened with angels and the hands of God taking the prophet to the holy place. But nothing happened. The people looked up. Then they looked at Bedward, who was still standing on the wooden chair, dressed out in religious gown. Those who never believed him quietly laughed and whispered at the back of the crowd of thousands of people. Many might have thought to themselves at that time, surely this is a madman. Alexander Bedward then announced that his ascension to heaven will instead happen at 3 p.m. that Friday afternoon. So the thousands of people decided to hang around. 3 p.m. slowly came. Bedward again got on the chair, and as the seconds and minutes ticked by 3 p.m., 3:02, 3:05, 3:09 p.m., nothing happened. But Bedward had hashed a very clever excuse. He looked at the people and he told them he had just ascended. Yes, he had ascended. The people were confused. He's standing there on the chair. How can he have ascended? When? How? In what way? Bedward looked at the people and he said, I have ascended in the spirit. On several occasions, Bedward was arrested and charged for different reasons. Eventually, he was arrested, declared insane by a court, and sent to the lunatic asylum, and that's where he died. After his death, his funeral was arranged. Many people attended his funeral in Augustown, St. Andrew. The crowd was mixed with followers and non-followers. He was buried in a cemetery which was later renamed Bedward Cemetery. Okay, so what exactly was the official cause of Alexander Bedward's death? Let's find out. So we move to the next section on the form. And in this section it says, certified cause of death and duration of illness. And they wrote, chronic bronchitis and senile decay. Let's look at the first one. Chronic bronchitis. What is that? Chronic bronchitis is a constant irritation or inflammation of the tubes which carry air to and from the lungs. The irritation of the tubes causes mucus to build up, which causes, among other symptoms, irritating coughs and difficulty breathing. In severe cases, chronic bronchitis can cause weight loss and swelling in the ankles, feet, or legs. Let's look at the second cause that they wrote there. Senile decay. What is this? Senile decay is another term for senile dementia. The word senile is used when referring to someone in old age. Yes, so that's when the word senile is used, when you are referring to someone in old age. So, what is senile decay? Senile decay is the mental deterioration associated with old age. Symptoms include being confused, forgetting things, persons, or recent events, and losing track of time. So many of you would have seen this in your great grandparents or a grandparent who is very old, and they forget people, they forget things, you know, they look confused at times, they lost track of time. So that was what was happening to Alexander Bedward. So we now know that Alexander Bedward died from chronic bronchitis, and he was also suffering senile decay. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe, like, or comment for more interesting videos like this.